Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jodi.
I'm Elliot.
And I started to say next week is a momentous episode,
No,
but that inherently makes this week a momentous episode.
Yes, it does.
This is our last episode of our first year. So the last episode of season one.
Of season one. And the great news, and we're very excited, is that we were picked up for a second season.
By us.
By us, yes. We picked us up for a second season.
We've decided we get to go for a second season.
The negotiations were tense, but I thought it was great. It worked out well.
We really got one over on us.
We did. We did.
No, so this is our 51st episode, which means that next episode. So we've been doing this for a whole year now.
I know. It's just amazing.
It is kind of fun. And so much fun. I think part of what has been most fun, I mean, I love recording these episodes. I love hearing myself talk for 30 minutes. No.
And then you can play it back.
Then I can play it back. Again. I can just listen to me over. No, that is not, I almost never go back and listen.
No.
Isn't that funny? Anyway, so I like making the podcast, but what has been especially fun for me in this past few months is that we've gotten to start hearing back from people. Yeah. So that our Facebook group is building up a little bit of steam, just makes me thrilled. So I want to spend just a second to say welcome to Seth Daly, our newest member of the SHMS podcast community there. So welcome, Seth. We look forward to hearing your contributions as well. And if you want to check out the Facebook group, there's a couple easy ways to get there. If you look up our Facebook page, which is So Here's My Story on Facebook, all of those things you can find at SHMS Podcast on all the platforms. There's a really easy button right there that says visit the group. So you can also just search for SHMS Podcast Community, yes. I believe. Also, if you go to our website, sohere'smystory.com, there's a link right at the top that takes you straight to the Facebook page.
And I do have a question. Did we initiate Seth by asking him a stupid question on the group?
We always ask a stupid question.
I know. I
can't remember which one we asked him.
Okay.
But,
all right. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't let that fall through the cracks.
Well, so now people are going to be scared to join the group, Elliot. Nice.
Yeah, well, they could just scroll through and see what.
Some of our most interesting questions have come around, like, is a hot dog really a sandwich? And some of our interesting conversations.
Fierce debate.
People have very strong feelings about whether hot dogs are sandwiches or paper clips versus staples.
And whether chocolate is a candy.
Oh, well, and then what almost inherently comes up then is somebody has to make a stand about white chocolate. One way or the other, they get violent about white chocolate.
Yes. Yeah, and I think there is a strong comment on white chocolate. Yeah.
And now everyone who was going to look at the Facebook groups, never mind, forget it. Take that off my to-do list. We do have more substantive conversations than that, but I think it's interesting to hear those things.
It is.
So, well, anyway, that's enough on that. Why don't you thank our sponsors and we'll get into it.
Absolutely. So as always, I'd like to thank Tom Loveland at Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, and Mary Craft, Staffing and HR Solutions. Thank you. You have a story.
I do.
Then take it away.
So here's my story. And this will be my first official story from the trip, since the other one was like pre-trips or like on my way to trip story. Okay. So this one is, and I promise I'm not just going to keep telling my Italy trip stories forever, but this one was important. So Christy Schmier, who is part of our podcast team here, who does our show notes, Christy Schmier and I have been friends for a long time. So it was the two of us were on this trip, and there's just no getting around it. This trip was basically organized around and for food. I mean, we were also there to see other things in Italy.
I can think of no better reason. There's no apology necessary if that's where you're going.
In fact, I was talking with someone who said, "So wait a minute, you're gonna go to Italy just for your friend's birthday so you can eat at a particular restaurant?"
Wait, you're saying that with a skeptical voice.
I know.
An amazing thing to do.
I was like, and in my mind, I'm like, I don't think I can even have this conversation with you because I literally can't think of a better reason to go to Italy.
That person's not your people.
I know. So I was just like, yeah, okay. So it was specifically scheduled around being able to get reservations at this particular restaurant that Christy has wanted to eat at for years. Mm-hmm. So that was the basis of it. But then we spent a lot of time eating well, and we also spent a lot of time talking about food, and not just in a kind of the way you think about like, oh, the texture of that. Like we weren't being food critics. We were just talking about the role of food and exercise and experience. Christy does our show notes. That is just one of many, many ways in the world that Christy uses this very unique talent she has of synthesizing big, complex things into really digestible, easy to comprehend. And that wasn't even a food pun, digestible. It wasn't meant to be things. That's why I seek her out for the nutrition guidance she gives, because she makes things. And she shared something from the studies that she's done in the research of food that was fascinating. That'll get into my main point here, which is because we actually make the main point first, and then I'll tell you that back bit. That would be helpful. One of the core things we talked about a lot was the difference, because we were noticing this, was the difference between two things that I think it's easy to conflate into one, but they're quite different, which is the difference between being satisfied from a meal and being full. And I think that at least I often sort of equate, like, you eat until you're full, or you eat until you're too full, or you're not full, so you eat.
Well, just to jump in my growing up, you eat until you hate yourself. That's really
that could happen too. That could happen too.
The shame spiral. But anyway, go on.
So the curiosity we kept playing around with was, we were eating a lot. We were certainly eating longer meals than we normally do. But it's not a surprise. Like, the portions in Europe are so much smaller. Yeah. We weren't eating a lot of volume of food. We were spending a lot of our time eating. But even though there were multiple courses, it still wasn't like this giant amount of food. And only once in the whole week did I feel uncomfortably full. And so we were talking about, like, how are we not eating the volume that we were? And we got down to this thing that when you are, most of the places we were eating, the food was really fresh. It was beautiful. It was well put together. It was real. It was, it certainly wasn't processed. It was incredibly tasty. And we reached a point of satisfaction really quickly. Whereas I think if you're missing some of those things, if you're just sort of shoving food in your mouth as fuel, or because it's in front of you, or it's a burger, you in search of, like, you're chasing this feeling that I think what we want is satisfaction. You're chasing this feeling, and instead you end up at full before you, like, the full is almost like the stop mark you get to when you can't find satisfaction in something. It's a loosely held idea, but the more I thought about it, the more it just felt like a lot of things in business where we're chasing a feeling that we want to have. And because we're sort of chasing it in the wrong way, or not necessarily wrong way, but in a less specific way, that we end up chasing full instead. I don't know. This sounded so good in my head before I started. Is it confusing?
No. So I'll take it from. I'll tell you what I immediately thought of, and then broaden it. And what I immediately thought of is, of course, in my profession, there is in my profession an emphasis on billable hours. Okay, I see billable hours if somebody says I billed out 2,500 hours this year. I see that as full. You're full. But that has nothing to do with the quality of the work that you delivered.
Sure.
It has nothing to do with client satisfaction. It just has to do with production.
Yeah.
And so that's the narrow focus. But the larger thing that I was thinking is that you said that the meals were longer, and it seems to me, and this was your experience, not mine. But what I took from that was that there's a focus on the entire production, the process, almost the ritual. There's a joy in how this is delivered, not just the consumption of it, but the whole process of delivering this, the whole experience, I would say, as opposed to just the result. And I think that there is such a misplaced focus on quantity, so that we're going to sit down and we're going to have a 3-hour meeting and hammer this out. And because if we spend 3-4 hours, if we spend half a day, we've got this thing. And, or our company retreat, we're going to spend a weekend. And I think that a lot of that, if you're not careful about it, you're more focused on leaving there full
Yes.
but not necessarily satisfied.
Well, perfect. Thank you for kind of helping articulate back to it. Because the thing that I was going to say that Christy shared with me from the research that really starts to hone in on what you're saying, then I have a great example from the business retreat side. She shared with me this research that there's research that if you, and I'm probably bastardizing this paraphrase of it, but you'll get the idea. If you enjoy a meal, like if you enjoy the experience of a meal, whether that's because it's pretty or it's in a lovely environment or whatever, you actually absorb more nutrients.
Really?
So you could take, here's how the study worked. That's right. I remember now. You can take a meal that is beautiful and well put together, and you've also got the different textures and the different, like you've got some crispy and some soft and some sweet and some, all these different things, and you're chewing it and eating it. Then they take that exact same meal, they blend it up so that it's just
like a smoothie.
It's a gooey smoothie of whatever it is, all the same flavors, all the same nutrients. Exactly. You drink that, you actually get more nutrient absorption. Your body is able to do more with the broader experience of something. And so there's actually some science to that. I was like, oh my God, it makes intuitive sense to me, but the fact that there's actually science behind it. And it's probably not purely the enjoyment. It's also that like part of digestion is chewing, and like, there's probably some biology there as well. But, I see the parallel on retreats, because I facilitate a fair number of leadership retreat weekends or leadership offsite days. And almost always they have kind of taken a crack at the agenda ahead of time before they talk to me to facilitate it. And almost always they want to pack in, like it's always like, I always feel a little bit bad because almost without fail, the first thing I have to do is help them cut like half of the things that they want to pack into the day, because they want to talk about this and then they want to do this. And then the funniest one was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Somebody sent it to me, and in the morning, they wanted to identify their values and articulate their mission and vision statement. And in the afternoon, they wanted to and I was like, holy cow. 3 hours seems like a lot of time, but that's not enough time to like decide your values and mission and vision and, all these things in the company.
And I can even drill that down, because in the public speaking class that I teach, and I require the students to turn in an outline before their speech. And the first speech might be 3 to 4 minutes. They turn in this outline, and it would take longer than their speech time to just read the outline, right? Because they've decided that they want to emphasize 17 different points.
Right. And so what's interesting to me is, and it's a little bit hard sometimes, but then they seem to get it, is in a leadership retreat, sometimes the best stuff happens like over dinner or during the lunch, where people are just chilling and hanging out together and talking about things. And not that you go to an offsite to just like hang out and, blab all day long, but I think of it as, if you're doing art direction of a visual publication of some sort, the importance of white space is so critical, because you need that, the same thing in workshop design. You don't put in a bunch of exercises, you put in an exercise, and then the real value comes from the debriefing and the understanding of it. The exercise itself, it has some value, but it's really in the expanding the experience of the thing. And it feels very counterintuitive, because you were like, oh, if we're going to take this day off, we have to get a lot done.
Well, but how many great ideas have you had in the shower or walking the dog or, in the spaces in between?
Well, have we talked about that company? It's called, there's this ideation company. Their name has some sort of light bulb in it. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But the way they work is they get paid an exorbitant amount of money to do this work. They gather all these experts together, depending on what they're being hired. They work with one client at a time who wants them to solve some big puzzly kind of thing. And they gather all the kind of experts that they think they need for that, whether it's neuroscientists or physicists or psychologists or whatever, business people. They gather this like team of experts. They spend a little time absorbing the information about the thing. So they do like an orientation phase. And then for what is usually, as I understand it, like a month or several weeks or whatever it is, they go like on a boat or to like this ranch or something like that. And there is not a prescribed agenda for that. They're not doing workshops every day. They draw things and they hang out and stare. And they call it the incubation phase. And they do end up talking about the things, but very informally. And they let it just naturally burble. They create this like white space, relaxed space, because the neuroscience behind that is you have to have alpha waves present in the brain, which is why the shower works, to have a good idea. You have to have that space in order to have an aha moment. And if you cram it all in, there's literally your brain cannot be that clever and interesting and have ahas about it.
And to go back to your story, to go back to the food, that's why I think, when you get in an American restaurant, or certainly the chain restaurants, whatever, you will get a ton of food. It's all brought out at once, and you can just spend the next 30 minutes just doing nothing but shoving stuff in your mouth, just shoving, and your stomach will be physically full. You will get to the point where you can't eat anymore, but the experience didn't leave enough white space, enough contemplative space. And so there's a huge difference between being satisfied with the experience and just serving your physical need to fill your belly.
Yes. And so the one meal that I said I ended up feeling kind of gross full was this one time some of our restaurants we like sought out in advance. Many of the best ones we just stumbled into. And of course, as statistics go, this one time we stumbled into a place that we thought was going to be fantastic from the outside. As soon as we stepped in, we were a little bit like, we're like, oh, but it's probably fine. Everything's been so great. And it was the one place where Christy was actually angry at the end of the meal. It was, I got this basically it was boxed pasta, and here's the line for me. I could have cooked it. And I'm not even saying like a normal, regular person. Like my husband is an amazing cook. So I'm not even saying Paul could have cooked it. I could have cooked it. And it was blah and it was gross. And Christy got this like octopus salad and it was like overcooked and just gross. And she was like, I'm so angry that a beautiful, intelligent octopus died for this like horrible salad. She was really upset. But in mine, just to make sure I clear the point, that was not satisfying. And in search of satisfying, I ate a fair amount of this big bowl of pasta, not consciously chasing satisfaction, but I just sort of kept taking bites as if I could almost get there. And I ended up eating more than I needed, and walking home, my belly felt gross and full. And not because the food was disgusting. It's just, I ate more than I needed.
Yeah. And I think it's so many cultures put an emphasis on the process. And it wasn't until you were talking about this that I was thinking back to Thursday night. Nikki and I took the boys to this concert in DC. They both wanted to see this band called Jukebox the Ghost, which is really actually really good. And but there were 2 tickets. So David and Alex went, and our plan was we would drive them into DC, drop them off at the concert venue, and Nikki and I would wander around and we'd get dinner and we'd kind of like restaurant hop. So we went into this Ethiopian restaurant and it was this little dive. It had good reviews, but it was this little dive. And in an Ethiopian restaurant, you eat with your hands. Yep. And the woman who came over was not fluent in English. She spoke in broken English. But one of the things that she said, she wasn't just, her husband came over and actually described and answered questions about the entree. But when she brought it over, what she could express to us is slow. She's just, I think the picture she had in her head was, just right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, and reaching. And she was explaining that these are things meant to be eaten slowly. And I thought it was so interesting that of all the things in the restaurant business that this woman in dealing with customers could have learned to convey in English. Yep. That's what she chose to convey.
I love that. And so like, so that people are not confused that we've suddenly turned into a travel and food blog radio. The reason I wanted to bring this up,
which would be great, by the way, if our sponsors would just kick it up a notch.
Ooh, yes, let's do that. Today we're broadcasting from Argentina. I think the metaphor here for what I see a lot of business owners and companies doing sometimes is direct in sort of chasing revenue or growth as it feels like that's what you want. And that being the version of full versus satisfaction. Not that satisfaction doesn't include feeling satiated and full, but there is, I think if Andrea Lee used to ask this question, what else besides money do you want your business to give you? And it doesn't, notice the question is, what else instead of money? So revenue is absolutely important. Growth is important when it's used correctly. But there's a whole other fabric there's a whole other set of threads that need to be woven into that fabric that I think can make business more satisfying. I was doing some work with someone who's just starting out in a consulting business, different than mine, but enough like mine that I was sort of mentoring her a tiny bit. And she was looking for like fee structures and exactly how, like what should I charge for this and what should I charge for that? And I said, well, part of this is you have to figure out like what you want it to feel like. Like, I know it took me a while to realize that there was like a pace and a structure that I was looking for. And some of it has to do which kind of work that I'm doing. So I like to have a little bit of operational work where I have some spreadsheet stuff going on. And then I love to have a fair amount of this more, I don't know what people joke, like business therapy, the more emotional side of navigating business and figuring out your weird inner workings and whatnot. I need a mix of those things. I need a mix of different client types. And I've structured my business in a way that I know the model works enough that I can sometimes work with smaller companies or, real startups who can't afford to pay my normal rates. All of those things were important to me, and never at the expense of dollars, but dollars were just one piece of it. And I think that gets overlooked sometimes, of like what satisfaction looks like.
Well, and I think it gets overlooked because you're told what you're supposed to be striving for. So years ago, my law firm was a lot bigger than it is now. I had a lot more lawyers. And I realized that what that meant was I didn't know a lot of the clients coming in. I didn't know anything about them. And we had great lawyers, who could do whatever they wanted, but I didn't know anything about them. I was stressed because I didn't know anything about them. The quality of the work wasn't, I didn't know that the quality was exactly where it should be for everybody, because you can't have control over that many things. You can't, I couldn't gauge whether the client experience was the same. Now, look, people run far-flung, wide, large enterprises, and they figured out how to do this. But for me, I wanted a firm where I knew these things personally.
So for you, that was more important than scale.
Correct.
For you. It doesn't make scale wrong. It just means that for you,
just for me,
hint, this is your business.
Yes. I had to figure out that, and I had a lot of ego tied up into this because, when I had when I had a larger firm, I, of course, was a genius, because I had all these people working for me. And then I thought, well, conversely, if I scale back, then I'm stupid, then I'm a failure, then I'm this, then I'm that.
And then someone says, oh, well, you just want a lifestyle business.
You just want a lifestyle business.
Which is such a nice way of saying, like, cute, like patting you on the head. It's a nice. Cute little hobby.
Nice. So, but I really had to come to terms with what, for me, that I was mistaking full for satisfied.
Yeah. We in an organization that that I'm involved with, we had somebody in that community years and years and years ago who had we were processing issues as a group, and they had grown their business. I may have even told this story before, some past episode, but they had grown their company to around like 12, 13 million, and where he was noticing they were at the moment was it wasn't fun. He said when we were like 8 million, he's like, I'm making less money personally than when we were at like 8. It's a lot more stressful because we have so many more people. It's no more fun. We're not like the benefit of growth in his now, to be fair, part of what that conversation is he was at kind of that middle ground. We've talked sometimes about, when you're walking out into the ocean, if you're right at that place where the waves are crashing around your torso, you either need to like plow out into the big waves or back up a little bit. So we talked about the possibility of them plowing out into the big wave. If they'd popped up to like 18, 20 million, they probably would have felt more comfortable again. They would have started having more profit, which is, interesting as we're talking about the difference between satisfied and this could be a whole other episode, satisfied and full. There's a lot of times when someone says to me, we want to grow, I'm like, well, do you want to grow or do you want to be more profitable? Because those two things don't usually, at least in any given moment, they don't go hand in hand typically. But, he had grown this to 12 million and they weren't having fun. They didn't like it. And over, not in that moment, but over a matter of time, they actually did decide to contract back. I don't think they went all the way back down to 8, but they put a plan in place to kind of go back to where they were more satisfied because they had just assumed that, there's that phrase that I really take issue with, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I don't buy it. Not that there's anything wrong with growth and scaling up, but if your business isn't satisfying, I think it's really dangerous to assume that the answer is more.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jodi Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.